This is one of the coolest monitors I've ever seen for a couple different reasons. This is the KTC M27P6, and this is a gaming monitor that clocks in at 4K. 27 inches. I'm normally kind of like on the fence when it comes to 4K. If you're sitting close, of course, the text and everything looks much sharper. But I usually feel like 1440 is good. But there's another application for this. So this will run 4K at 160 Hertz. But this is a dual mode monitor, meaning that it basically has two different native modes, and you just pop open the menu on the screen and run it at 1080p 320 Hertz. Because we can do a lot with 1080p 320 Hertz, and you can do a lot with 4K 160 Hertz, but we've got options here. For the games that, 4K is just too much for, like some of the modern AAA games, sit back a couple of feet, run it at 1080p 320 Hertz. It'll be a much smoother experience when it comes to your frame rates and stuff, because you're only running at 1080p instead of 4K. And if you're sitting back a few feet, with a controller, or just I pull my keyboard back from my monitor, it looks pretty good. Because you remember, when it comes to resolution, how far away you are from the screen is a big part of the way things look. So when you're sitting close, 4K is really, really, really good. Also, the 1080p 320 Hertz makes it a very good monitor when it comes to like competitive FPS games. Being able to run at 1080p means you're going to have a higher refresh rate, and also 320 Hertz with a 2 millisecond response time. It just means that everything's going to be a little bit sharper. We'll test the ghosting on this in just a second. I'm recording this a few days later because I didn't realize how good the color was, and I wanted to see what was going on here, because I thought my brain, IPS is an IPS, but no, it's not. A mini LED is totally different than a regular IPS. So we've got this mini LED matrix in the background, way better than most backlights. You have 1,152 individual zones. It's one LED per zone, and that supports local dimming on all of the different zones. And then between that, we have a quantum dot light transmission film. I'm not exactly sure how that works, but then you've got your high-speed IPS panel on top of that. We're getting a 1,000,000-to-1 contrast ratio. We're talking OLED levels of contrast. The blacks are not quite as good, but this does, in my opinion, a better job in bright rooms, and some of the bright colors do look a little bit better. So while the shadows are not quite as deep and dark as the OLED, it does have benefits in other ways. Another big benefit for me, and the reason that I would much rather use this when you compare it to like an OLED, well, this one, it's not going to have burn-in. It's just an IPS panel on top, and you're not going to have to worry about your bars and your menus and everything burning into your screen, so you won't have to do all the screen care stuff, which actually really annoys me with OLED gaming panels. Let's go ahead and finish up going through the rest of the specs. Our peak brightness is 1400 nits with HDR. It's really nice and bright, but that's part of being a mini LED. Then we have 800 nits for standard definition stuff. The color performance, you've got 99.5% of the sRGB gamut, 146% volume. You have 98% of the DCI P3 gamut at 110% volume, and 97% coverage of Adobe RGB at 119% volume. So above and beyond that, we do have FreeSync Premium Pro, and that's the one that basically gives you the entire refresh rates, and it's also G-Sync compatible. All right, let's go through the ports. So we have two HDMI 2.1, and those will both support the 4K at 160 Hertz. Then we have one DisplayPort 1.4, which will do 4K at 160 Hertz as well. Then we have USB Type-C, which will do 65 watt power delivery, and we have a DisplayPort alternate mode with the USB Type-C. So you can plug up 4 different things to this. Above and beyond that, we do have a USB Type-A there and another USB port, and this allows you to have an internal KVM. So this is kind of cool because you can go in and change 2 different things. You can change your source for, which video source you want to have from the 4 different choices, and then you can go in and change your USB source. Do you want to use the USB Type-A or the USB Type-C? And that way you can have different USB for different things. Or you can have, your mouse and keyboard plugged up or your controller plugged up to your monitor, and then say, okay, I'm going to switch over to my other screen. Let's have my mouse and keyboard work with the other computer. So it's like a little KVM built in. It's kind of handy. All right, and above and beyond all that, we have actually decent usable HDR. Whenever you see something that's like HDR 400, I'm kind of like, they're just checking a box. This is HDR 1400 nits peak brightness with their HDR. So you can really see everything in the game with this HDR, and a lot of this is going to be up to the developers. Please, developers, make sure you give us some good color grading and stuff, or give us the tools to color grade it ourselves in HDR. Like when you look at a game like the latest Doom, The Dark Ages, they have given us some amazing tools to go in and say, this is our brightness, our 1400 nits. That's where our default brightness level is, but you can go in and change the thresholds. You can go in and change the contrast and really fine tune your HDR experience. And I hope more games do stuff like that, because it does make a massive difference. And when you get, up to a brightness level of 1400, now we're talking. Now we've got real HDR, and not just like, barely checking a box HDR. It's not going to give you that washed out gray look anymore. You're going to get, deep blacks and nice color, especially the mini LED also does help with some of that. Now the USB-C can power stuff. They said it can power a MacBook. I don't have one of those, but can power a laptop because 65 watts. I'm going to use this with my Steam Deck. You plug that in, and this will actually power and charge the Steam Deck while you're getting a signal to your screen, so you can play your Steam Deck games on this monitor. So, even some mini PCs will work just fine with this, because some of them use less than 65 watts, so that'll be just fine. Let's cover the ergonomics. So we've got a height adjust of 130 millimeters, tilt plus or minus 20 degrees. We got swivel of 145 degrees. This can really swivel. Like, I wasn't expecting that. We got a 100 by 100 Visa mount on the back, and then it will do a full 90-degree pivot, because this stand is substantial, and it's got a nice flat area in the front. I like these kind of stands because you can put stuff on them. Like, you can put your controllers on them, you can put your Steam Deck on them or whatever. So I do like the fact that we do have some surface area right there on the stand, and it's not like one of those tripod stands that just takes up a bunch of room, but you can't really use the room that's around it. But having the flat area does help. The back of this unit is very sleek black, and then we do have some RGB there for the KTC logo, and you can go in and change that in the menu there, change the colors, change the breathing or whatever. So yeah, that's kind of cool. All right, in your gaming setup, I'm going to go through that part of the screen here. So you've got your adaptive sync you can turn on and off. You got your overdrive that you can turn on and off, which will allow you to get the faster response times. I just cranked it all the way up because why not? You can also go in and put it on a mode to do lower input lag, and why not turn that on to make sure that you have no latency between you and the game. And then we have MPRT. Now, MPRT, if you're not familiar with that, it is a different technologies that make the motion feel smoother. It doesn't actually change the, gray to gray, doesn't change any of that. It just darkens the screen when you turn this on, but it will make the motion feel smoother because it's doing like strobing of the mini LEDs. So, by strobing them on and off very quickly, it's tricking your brain into thinking that the movement is much smoother, because in between every bright frame, there's a dark frame. It's like a refresh for your brain. It's kind of weird. That's kind of the way CRTs work. I could do an entire video on why this is so cool. It wasn't even in the notes that KTC sent me, so I don't even know if they know how cool this is. But this whole area of technology, I feel like, is a direction that a lot of monitors, especially as we get faster with these crazy refresh rates, I feel like a lot of monitors should start going down the path of exploring different and better ways to do this black frame insertion. Instead of just relying on the monitor, there's also something I like to use called shader glass. And in the latest beta version of this program called Shader Glass, they have introduced all kinds of CRT effects. I'm talking scanline simulations and black frame insertions, various types of black frame insertions, to essentially trick your mind to make you think that the motion is extremely smooth. It works better on monitors like this that have super high refresh rates, because then they can employ those techniques in a much faster way. So shader glass is something to check out as well. Play some of your emulators. It's an overlay that just kind of slaps on the screen. You can see here I'm moving it around or whatever, but it's an overlay that slaps on the screen, and then you can maximize it and play your old games and just see if they look smoother. Because on a monitor like this, with a program like that, you're going to get some buttery smooth performance, and your mind is going to perceive much smoother motion. What's all this whistling for? So you're seeing a flicker here on the screen. With my naked eye, I do not see much of a flicker at all. And the only reason you're seeing that is because the technology, the black frame insertion, is not matching up with the frame rate of the camera. But you don't got frame rate with your eyeballs. So for me, this monitor with the the black frame insertion and all that stuff, and some CRT filters, was really awesome. It's maybe the closest experience I've had yet to an actual CRT. And that's saying something. All right, let's take a look and see how the ghosting looks. All right, so for these ghosting pictures, I just run around, and then I shake my camera a lot, and I try to find the edges and see how they look. And normally you'll see multiple edges. Let's see if we can find some. I'm not seeing a lot of ghosting here. That's right there a little bit. It's kind of out of focus, but you can see this is like very minimal. Let's see here. These guys usually have there you can see like right there. I mean, but I've seen some ghosting that'll go back to here and it'll have like 5 images of something as you're moving around. So I noticed that the ghosting performance at 360 hertz and the ghosting performance at the 160 hertz is about the same because the monitor is still doing the same gray to gray when it comes to that. So response time is more important than the refresh rate when it comes to ghosting. Got some 4K ghosting shots here. There we go. That's a little out of focus, but you can see what happens when you swing really quickly. See a little bit of ghosting there, but it's so minimal that it's like it's hard to find frames that have ghosting. This is an extremely good monitor, and I can't believe we're getting this good when it comes to just IPS mini LED. We're getting close to OLED levels of motion clarity with a lot of these things. So the technology is really coming along. Like, look at this. There's not any ghosting, and it's like I've got any here. See a little bit of a double up right there. Not enough for my brain to care about. How about over here? Anything? Yeah, a tiny bit on the side. Not much. This is like an A grade panel when it comes to ghosting. I think the only thing that's S are like OLEDs, but that's at a different price point altogether. And honestly, I prefer this over an OLED. And the reason is because I don't like having to deal with all of the stuff like having to hide my start bar because there might be burn-in, or having to go through all of the like, hey, I've been playing for a couple of hours, I better make sure my UI is not getting burnt in. It's not that big of a deal with OLEDs, but there's a lot of health stuff you have to do with them, so I prefer something like this. Like OLED technology is cool and all, but you know, if we can just keep going in this direction with mini LEDs and with, you know, different technologies to make the motion feel better, I think that I would prefer that personally. OLEDs would be great for like watching movies and stuff, but you know, different technologies for different things. All right, so I think I've talked about the KTC M27P6 quite enough. The fact that it's 4K and 1080p at 160 and 320 hertz is a pretty big deal for me, because normally I like 1440p at this resolution, but now we've got this interesting thing here. I do really like 1080p because it's so fast. So yeah, I think that's really cool. It looked really good. The motion was great. Ton of options. KVM. It's loaded. It's premium. It's one of the best 27-inch monitors that I've ever seen, and I'm not just saying that because, you know, I'm working together with them or anything. It just, you know me. If I say that, then that's what I mean. It's one of the best 27-inch monitors that I've ever used. So there you have it. KTC M27P6. Let me know what you think in the comments, and I'll see you next time.